Raul Nino.
Raul Nino.
Our phenomenal feature part this evening. He has been a part of the Chicago poetry scene since the early 1990s. He has been the winner of the City of Chicago's Sister Cities contest that took him to Mexico City on a reading tour as a cultural ambassador. I am so jealous. I don't get to go anywhere as a cultural ambassador my ass. I don't get to do
You get to come to Chicago from wherever the hell it is you live.
You get to come to Chicago.
Your cultural ambassador, Gurney.
Gurney Mall.
Oh, Gurney Mall's new. No, I'm so not an ambassador of that. Knowing the gang activity in that mall, I'm not going to be an ambassador of that. And in 1993, Illinois Poet Laureate Gwendolyn Brooks named him that year's significant Illinois poet. I am so jealous. This is so wonderful. He's got all these awesome things. He's the author of Breathing Light and A Book of Mornings. This guy has books. He's done so many awesome. I'm so officially jealous. I'm not even going to go reading the rest of this because he's so phenomenal. I'm so looking forward to his feature this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, everybody give it up for Raul Nino.
Thanks a lot. Let me just plow right ahead in here. I'm going to read a couple of poems from a book that was published 4 years ago now, chapbook, a cycle of poems called A Book of Mornings. And none of the pieces have individual titles, so I'll just go ahead and read them. The day begins, so slow again, a molasses glow pours in through cloudy sky. Winter solstice recollects, hours begin to stretch. Frozen ground gives way to magnetic north and south. Brawny green begins to reach. Tulip bulbs and sturdy crocuses. Perennial etiquette filling in gaps between gray and mud. Two laughing boys chase each other while above them acrobatic squirrels show off between branch and buildings. An almost forgotten song is heard. Migratory birds croon pneumatic gossip. This cycle ends with the arrival of my son, and so I'll just move on. My son wakes up before me so early that robins still dream. He crawls over his sleeping mother, whimpering half words and scattered phrases. He pokes my shut eyes, pulls my ear with a strong grip, and makes a muffled cry, pointing into the darkness. I want to sleep a little more. Let my last dream play itself out. My son has other plans. He wants to play. He wants his juice. He wants me to chase him. He wants to see the cat eat. This little person who seems to have always been hugs me, and I hug him down onto a couch in silence. Sleep finds him fast, and all I hear are his deep breaths and a robin beginning its day. I've been working on a lot of new material. Okay. Sorry. I've been working on a lot of new material. I work very slowly, so I'm going to be reading the rest will be mostly new pieces. It's taken quite a bit of years to get here. This one is called Moment by the Lake for Teresa Nino, my mom. Wave after wave reaching, wind pushing back and forth, layered clouds racing above. I held my mother's hand to steady her as she told me how much she enjoyed this, walking on sand along the lakefront, this little thing, this moment, this autumn pleasure. I heard children in the distance playing, laughing. I heard waves thrusting, sinking, sand sucking, wind strong, gusting, dying leaves loose, oak and birch, bristling, bending, barking in more bluster. I strained to hear what more my mother had to say, her eyes tearing in the wind. She seemed happy in that moment, her hands soft and calloused, and the light Did I mention the light? Everything was so bright.
All right.
We're back.
Yay! Woo!
Carrying on the theme,
What is the mic?
my mom and, again for my mom, but this one is called Off Guard. So there we were, my son on my mother's lap, a book on his lap. And though she didn't quite understand the words, her hands knew enough to turn the pages. His eyes as wide as hers, 4 moons caught in the gravity of a child's story. He would point at pictures and his joyful language explained the plot to a woman caught off guard by happiness. His small hand wrapped around her thumb, and there I was, caught off guard as well, my hands recalling her hands. The texture of memory, a child's story, those hands generous and knowing when to turn the page. I read this at the open mic last time I was here. I tweaked it a bit, so I'm going to read it again.
I was gonna say, we don't have it on videotape, so now, yay! Oh.
It's called Double Feature 1974. I don't know if anyone here has lived in Chicago long enough to remember the Tivoli Theater on North Avenue. Anyone? Ah. That's where this takes place. Double Feature 1974. A Western and Charles Bronson, summer, Tivoli Theater, double feature, darkness, popcorn, and a large Coke. And me, just a kid, shadowed by loneliness. They wore hats, white, black, in the Western. They rode horses, big, muscled, rumps, snorting. Their guns came out. They always came out, shots. Something had gone wrong. Something was always going wrong. Bodies would fall because something was always wrong. Wrong was a hungry ghost starving for bodies, mouth wide open, swallowing all those white hats and black hats, and Levi's and boots and spurs and gun belts and all. Yet the horses seemed fine with it. A bit startled by the fuss, the noise, the commotion, but fine more or less. They trotted away, looking for sugar cubes, salt lick, or water. I just kept looking, watching. Horses going off camera, dead cowboys, ground covered with bodies, bits of crimson everywhere, a hungry ghost satiated with wrongs, at least for a while. And the sound of me breathing quietly, crunching on salty popcorn, sucking up a cold Coke, while outside in the summer heat patient years were waiting for me to make choices, decisions, choose routes, roads, or paths. I had no idea that they were out there then, those future years, loitering, waiting for me. But it was a double feature that day, and Charles Bronson had a death wish, and I wanted to see him meet it. And there was still a lot of popcorn left, and the ice hadn't watered down the Coke yet. And for just a little while, I didn't feel so lonely. The darkness of the Tivoli Theater felt good, and I still had change for candy. No one in that theater called me names, and the only tears being shed were on the screen. And for just a little while that day, the only drama in my life was watching horses trot away from dead cowboys and Charles Bronson meeting his destiny, while I sat there watching with no thoughts about what was waiting outside, just watching, just breathing. These next couple of poems are sort of related. I mentioned my son earlier. One more time, he recently started his 18th year, and I dedicate this to him. It's called Look at Me. This poem, the last line in this poem is taken from an interview with the Japanese novelist Haruki Murakami. I was reading the interview and this quote jumped out, and I knew I wrote it down and I was going to use it someday in a poem, and it ended up being the last line in this poem. This is called Look at Me. Now that the center can hold me, a shadow having found its source, at the edge of a playground, I watch fat crows perched in oats. I count children kinetic under a summer sun, my son among them, a sweaty reflection seeming to always turn to me, grinning, his face glowing with excitement. Look at me, Daddy, look at me. I look, I always look, and look, where I'm coming from the blind now see. Bulk of leaves gushing green, a sky so blue it has to be a sea. This mariner's night unanchored, drifting in summer air, he runs to me, my son. I bury my face into his moist hair. Just living itself is an act of prophecy.
Okay.
On the theme of my self-imposed theme of fatherhood here, this is, I didn't have it's self-explanatory. This is called My Father. Hardly real, hardly here, but somewhere. I have no idea who he is, what he sounds like, the pace of his stride as he walks into or out of a room. Is his hair long? Does it fall over his brow? Is it gray now? Does he limp through his days? Does he hunch over tables? Do his hands tremble? Is he still alive, or has his shadow vanished? The province of these questions seems far removed. What I wanted to say was not this. What I wanted to say was something else. It had nothing to do with love. Only my landscape of memory turning over. I've seen the photographs, and it's true. At this age now, I look just like him. I have his jaw, I have his chin, I have his nose. That is all. A bit of broken mirror. I'm just another guy whose father left his mother, sitting at a table going over old words that meant to say more than the obvious hardness of memories that don't exist. What do I recall? That place so long ago where time dragged its feet, kicking up the dust in someone else's house, stirring up the scent of someone else's life, mocking my tight focus on my shifting solitude. Is that it? Was his map too small, his dreams too large? Was it age? It must be age. I've aged and he doesn't know it. He's aged and I do know it. We've all aged, and what does it matter? The novelties of our lives have been half written, half read. Father, what kept you from wanting to know me, to read my story? A woman bursting with love for you. Did you know that she was alone when I arrived? Did you know that she was alone when she named me? Do you know that I am alone here with you now? My landscape turning over, far removed from the provinces of who you were. Papa, you left me, and I don't know how to leave you. Keeping track of time. I recently was going over piles of old poems, discovering things that I didn't know I had written, and this is one of them. I gave it the title, Grace in Chaos. There is grace in chaos, and one wonders at the strangeness of this. Colors flash and strokes across the eyes, sounds crash. An overzealous attempt at modernity, somehow, and to simply sit by a window in early January, snow falling, lazy lines to earth, contours the oddity that the senses can be fooled into normalcy. Mundane as that might be, its ring lands true, a small echo that finally fits two stubborn pieces without shape into shape, a spiral that names us, gives us reason, maybe hope. Some years back, I discovered a Russian poet. At the time he was still alive. He later was given the Nobel Prize, Joseph Brodsky. And it was Joseph's essays that introduced me to a whole galaxy of poets that at the time I didn't know. And one of them was an English poet, W.H. Auden. And one day I found a picture of W.H. Auden taken by Richard Avedon. And I liked that picture so much, I cut it out, and now I have it above my desk, and I wrote a poem about it. Reflections on Abaddon's Auden. The way the photographer tells it, you were grouchy that morning. In a New York winter, you and your clutter, your slippers and wrinkles, called to the demands of immortality from English youth of country green to a naked blizzard in the New World. Your hatless focus into a cold lens, seeming to ask, is that it? The verses stilled, the opera silent. Your sleeping friends, some forever. Who will see this photo? Who will care? You might have thought. Hands tucked in two coat pockets, feeling the need for a cup of coffee, a cigarette, a moment to gaze at the hour, gather momentum, a bit of warmth for the task ahead, something the camera will miss. Skip that. Time. These next two poems, they're short, and Chicago has a new mayor. And I found out, I don't know how it escaped me, but I found out only after he had declared his candidacy that he went to my high school in the North Shore, New Trier West. He was in a class ahead of me. We never crossed paths. My experience in the North Shore was different than his experience. One day in the North Shore, one day I was walking along some railroad tracks, listening for bird songs, duck calls, grass rustling. Trees hit themselves and their leaves sounded an ocean. I could hear dogs barking to each other some distance, while my boots ground into small rocks and dried weeds. It was a hot day, summer, a lost cloud here and there, lots of shadows, mine just ahead. The tracks ended and I turned onto the road. I kept walking. A car came by, fast, filled with kids my age, boys. One of them threw an almost empty milkshake container at me. It exploded on my chest. I remember that they laughed, called me Spick, their eyes looking at me through the back window. I remember that I stood there sweating, the smell of sugar on me sweet. While I was at New Trier, there was a couple of suicides. This is about one of those suicides. There's forest preserves in the North Shore. One of them is called Harm's Woods, just west of Old Orchard Shopping Mall. This is called Harm's Woods. She must have made a perfect dead girl hanging from a rope, swinging slightly, maybe, by a light breeze from a tall tree, maybe spruce, maybe, but more likely elm. The North Shore is like that. Lots of elms and lots of lovely girls. Long hair, good teeth, clear skin, money, popular. Like the girl at the end of that rope. She was depressed, the front page read. On her way to an Ivy League school, the paper pointed out. Good grades, a future, her parents were important. Power and influence. She did it by herself. Drove a good car into the Forest Preserve parking lot. Walked out and into the woods. She chose a good rope and a good tree and a good hour. She was a good student. Everyone was in shock, the paper went on. I remember hearing that friends of hers went to that forest preserve searching, trying to figure out where it happened. There are lots of trees to choose from. Lighten the mood. My editor is in the audience, one of my oldest, dearest friends. And in my first book, Breathing Light, I wrote a poem for him. It's called Dead Yellow Flowers, for Carlos Cumpiano. Chicago Springs, what a joke. The birds need mufflers, the worms can't wiggle, the flies are frozen, and the trees say, not again. I sit here listening to complaints from the left, from the right, the politics of weather. I have a friend who says he's moving to Texas. Con la raza ese, he tells me, Se me cae muy gordo este clima, vato. I took him seriously until I heard from the well-informed, oh, his February ritual. He says that every year. Keeps him going. This is the same friend who put yellow flowers all over our apartment. Some color. Este pinche apartamento needs some color. Open the window, compadre. This place is muy stuffy. I would have done this atmospheric paint job long ago if I had taken the time. But then again, I'm not as sensitive to the unseen as my friend. Some color, he's right. Even if the flowers are dead, they look better than me.
Oh.
And the last two poems, short one and a slightly shorter one. No, short one and a slightly longer one. This is called Wet Grapes for Molly. This is what is left. A cluster of grapes, still wet from washing, and sandy feet from a beach, and the smell of sunblock on your shoulders. I want you again, but not like the first time, when the sun was still setting early, and streets were so noisy. No. Now it's quiet. It's a quieter need, with long shadows stretching over a still life of white grapes, and a mind racing for more. Thank you, you guys have been really good. I'm going to just read this one last poem that it's brand new, and it's for a dear friend of mine. It's called Blue Heron in Winter, for Tony. We've gone white, my friend, a bit bald as well. What is left on our heads longs to match the season, brooded snow beneath us. Even strands in our nostrils have gone tow-haired. But that's only a guess. I only know what I know, and what I know is that I've known you since we were children. And what is that but a lifetime looking back? As we chit-chat and small talk through a winter forest, cold bark bare, ice-wrapped trunks trekking a path covered in mammal prints, both wild and domesticated, bantering about coyote, fox, and buck deer, and a mountain lion rumored to have wandered this far. A blue heron quietly gliding to a wet landing along the river, the trail we followed twisting and bending along its banks. How many times had we done this, followed this path and talked? I saw the heron's feathers through thin trunk trees, almost sky blue in the dimming light. And then you said that you needed to take a leak, and I watched as you cut a path into the thicket. Then I noticed how dark it was getting, and I turned to look at where we had just walked from, and I couldn't make out our tracks. And I turned again and lost you, calling out your name. You didn't answer, and I stood there looking at us from every angle of every year and every season. Then there you were, smiling, lifting your long legs over thorn bush, walking through snow drifts back to the trail, puffing out clouds of steam, pointing at them, saying, it's getting cold, and you can see your breath. And I thought at that moment, I love you. I've known you long enough to say with ease such a simple thing. Two old friends who met on the 6th grade monkey bars, and now stand on a snow-covered trail in a forest in winter, going gray, going bald, watching a heron fly away through clouds of our own making. Thanks a lot.
Everybody was loud enough. Give it up one more time, Raul Nino. Yeah! I didn't even get to applaud because he's giving me something. Thank you. That was absolutely phenomenal hearing that. Thank you very much. And I have to actually say to you that this is the added bonus of being an editor of literary magazines. Although the March issues of CC&D and Down in the Dirt were released today, I've chosen to not read anything from them until next week, because they happen to have covers that represent partying on New Orleans, and it is Mardi Gras next Tuesday for our feature next week for Buddha 309. So I'm going to be reading some of that, but I would like to ask, 4 poems ago you read a poem about a girl who hung herself on the north side. I am an editor of a magazine, and I would really like you to send that to me. I will give you an email address if you are willing to have that published somewhere else. You always keep the rights to it, but I would just like to broadcast that because that was phenomenal. I really enjoyed that, I really did. Really and true, honest for true, I did. So I'll give you that information, and thank you very much. And because you guys just heard a bit, next week our feature happens to be Buddha 309. Yeah, give it up for Buddha. I think we're gonna fly him for him because he's all hyped up and excited about having this feature next week. And after that, and it's Mardi Gras. Everybody has to be all stupid and crazy for it. Dan Cleary is the week after that, and then we got Tom Roby and Janine Ramos salute in the end of March. I won't even go into April.
Will there be beats?
Pardon me?
Will there be beats?
Okay, if you have a poem something about New Orleans or something like that, and you don't even have to get naked, I might give you beads.
Oh.
Yeah. He's like, but I wanted to get naked. Well, you can if you would like. You're more than welcome to. But everybody, you're all more than welcome. This is a very open space. You're more than welcome to if you like. You just don't have to. You don't have to feel like that you're in New Orleans. And no, you have to show something in order to get these. Anyway, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank everyone. Thank you for a phenomenal feature this evening. I look forward to seeing everybody next week for great features. And